Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. NDA candidate Ramnath Kovind has been elected the country's 14th president. Former governor of Bihar, Kovind will be the only second Dalit leader after R.K. Narayanan since independence to occupy India's highest ceremonial post. In the final vote count, NDA nominee Kovind received 65.6% votes, translating into 7,02,044 electoral college votes, while UPA candidate Meera Kumar managed to get 34.35%, which translates to 3,67,314 votes. According to media reports, there was cross-voting in Uttar Pradesh, Gujarat and Goa during the elections, which resulted into Kovind's massive two-thirds vote majority. Now, 522 MPs voted for, while 225 parliamentarians voted for Meera Kumar. Current President Pranab Mukherjee's term is ending on the 24th of July, and Kovind will take oath the next day to become India's 14th president. In the last presidential polls held in 2012, Pranab Mukherjee had defeated P.S. Sangma by over 69% votes. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze President-elect Ramnath Kovind's victory. Joining me on the program today are Aditi, Phadnis, political editor of the Business Standard, Ashok Tandon, senior journalist, Yatish, Rajawat, policy analyst, and Rakesh Batabyal, associate professor, JNU. But before we go into the debate and discuss President-elect Ramnath Kovind's victory, let's take a look at what transpired through the course of the day today.
Ramnath Kovind will be the 14th President of India. The NDA-backed candidate won the presidential election, securing over 7 lakh votes. Kovind was in a contest with opposition candidate former Lok Sabha Speaker Meera Kumar. In the final vote count, Kovind secured more than 65.65% of the votes against Meera Kumar's 34.35%. Counting that started at 11 a.m. went through 8 rounds before the final result was declared.
Shri Ramnath Kovind has secured 7,02,044 votes, which is more than this quota. Therefore, in pursuance of the provisions contained in Section 11 of the Presidential and Vice Presidential Elections Act 1952, read with Rule 35 of the Presidential and Vice Presidential Elections Rule 1974, I, Anup Mishra, the returning officer for the Presidential Election 2017, hereby declare that Shri Ramnath Kovind, resident of 42 HIG Maharishi Dayanand Vihar, Phase 2, Kalyanpur, Kanpur, Uttar Pradesh, has been duly elected to the office of the President of India.
According to reports, Uttar Pradesh, Gujarat and Goa saw cross-voting during the elections that resulted in Kovind getting over two-thirds votes. 522 MPs voted for Kovind, while 225 voted for Meera Kumar.
जिस पद का गौरव डॉक्टर राजेंद्र प्रसाद जी, डॉक्टर सर्वपल्ली राधाकृष्णन जी, APJ अब्दुल कलाम जी और प्रणब मुखर्जी जी जैसे महान विद्वानों ने बढ़ाया है, उस पद पर मेरा चयन मुझे बहुत बड़ी जिम्मेदारी का एहसास करा रहा है। व्यक्तिगत रूप से मेरे लिए ये बहुत ही भावुक क्षण है।
जिस विचारधारा की लड़ाई लड़ने के लिए मैं इस चुनाव में शामिल हुई थी, वो आज 20 जुलाई 2017 को समाप्त नहीं हुई है। विचारधारा और मूल्यों की ये लड़ाई जारी रहेगी, क्योंकि हमारे देश के बहुत सारे लोग इसमें विश्वास करते हैं और इसमें अपना संबल पाते हैं।
Meanwhile, as flowers and extra security arrived at the former Bihar governor's home in Delhi, sweets were passed around at his hometown in Uttar Pradesh.
सामान्य परिवार में जन्मे, गरीब परिवार से निकलकर आने के बाद देश के इतने महामहिम राष्ट्रपति पद पर आज रामनाथ कोविंद जी का जहां पर बैठना, ये सामान्य भारतीय व्यक्ति को गौरवान्वित करने वाला है और इस बात की खुशी भारतीय जनता पार्टी का कार्यकर्ता और पूरे देशवासी मना रहे हैं।
In the presidential election 2017 held on July 17th, of the total 4,880 valid voters, 4,109 MLAs and 771 MPs cast their vote. 71-year-old Kovind will be sworn in as the president on July 25th. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, it's finally official there. Ramnath Kovind elected as the 14th president of the country. Let me bring in my guests into the picture now and analyze this victory. Beginning with Aditi Phadnis, political editor of the Business Standard. Aditi, you know, it's not shocking. It was expected. We knew that Ramnath Kovind was going to win right from the beginning. But one thing of note definitely is the fact that there was cross-voting, and that's why he managed to cross the 65% mark.
Well, that's not surprising either. After all, cross-voting, official, if you can call it that, cross-voting was already declared on the part of the JDU in Bihar when they decided to part ways with the Mahagathbandhan or the ruling alliance there, and voted for Mr. Kovind despite the agreement being to vote for Mrs. Meera Kumar. So that is there. Also, there are some rather odd things about this election. In Andhra Pradesh, for instance, Meera Kumar got 0 votes. And that was because the opposition in the assembly led by Jagan Mohan Reddy, as well as the ruling Telugu Desam party, all of them, everybody voted for Mr. Kovind. So the opposition, even the Congress MLAs such as they are, I think there's 1 or 2, apparently did not vote for Meera Kumar. So and in Gujarat, it's all very mysterious because the number of votes that Mr. Kovind has got far outnumbers the number of the kind of majority that the BJP has in that house. So I think some amount of cross-voting was not surprising, but some has, this tells us that where state governments see their own interest, they are ready to play ball with the center.
Sure.
After all, one of the reasons why JDU informally let us know that they were going to vote for Kovind was that they really could not, after prohibition, after declaring prohibition and the consequent loss of revenue of the state, they could not really afford to take up cudgels with the center.
Sure.
So I have not seen the figures for Tamil Nadu, so I'm not sure, you know, what the pattern of voting there was. But that should also be interesting.
Indeed, it will all be interesting. But like you mentioned, you know, the states have played it extremely safe as far as the presidential election itself is concerned. Mr. Tandon, like Mr. Kovind rightly pointed out, you know, he has big shoes to fill. He's got several responsibilities, and it's going to be a challenging task ahead for him.
Of course. See, first of all, let's forget about the academic part of it, the cross-voting, etc. The fact remains that Ramnath Kovind is going to be the 14th President of the Republic, and it calls for, you know, he's getting congratulatory messages from across the party lines. And the next couple of days, the country is going to witness some very colorful events of farewell to the outgoing President, Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, and Ramnath Kovind taking over as. Next couple of days, I think 2 or 3 very, you know, high-profile banquets have been lined up for Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, and the ceremony of, you know, for the retiring president also is going to be very colorful, which the country would like to know, and so would be the ceremony, again very colorful, for the new incumbent being taken to the Rashtrapati Bhavan. Now, having said that, there are 2-3 observations which I would like to make is, first is the 77 votes being declared invalid, which is very unfortunate. 21 members of parliament have, you know, wasted their votes because they are all elected representatives, and nobody expected them to waste their vote either intentionally or otherwise.
And the voting process is very simple, Mr.
Very
Tandon.
simple.
There's
Special pen was provided, special ink was there, and there was absolutely no reason for any MP to invalidate his vote intentionally or otherwise. 2 other factors which I would like to point out is, see, one is that it has exploded the myth that there could have been a, you know, united opposition against the ruling NDA's candidate. and that myth has been exploded largely on account of, I would say, mishandling of the entire election by the main opposition Congress party. Had they chosen their candidate prior to the NDA and had gone to the NDA for a national consensus, at least the opposition unity would have been there, which was not to be seen this time after the election. Secondly, which I was just now listening to the opposition candidate Meera Kumar's argument that the fight was on ideological grounds. Now, if the fight was on ideological ground, why should non-NDA parties be supporting the NDA candidate? I mean, you can't call it an ideological battle when non-NDA parties like JDU, BJD and TRS and AIADMK. No, I think rather than making it an issue in the campaign that it is an ideological battle, the opposition should have first concentrated on opposition unity, and in the campaign would have said, well, in a democracy, no post can go uncontested. We are contesting, and we are trying to mobilize opposition and marshal all opposition forces against the opposition, the NDA candidate. But to make it an ideological battle, I think it has proved counterproductive.
Sure, sure. Professor, I'd like to bring you into the picture now. You know, the second only Dalit president of the country, and you know, this has happened even as the Rajya Sabha was discussing lynchings as far as the SC/STs and minorities are concerned. So how much of a burden does Mr. Ramnath Kovind have to bear going forward?
You see, if you start from a takeoff point, should be that this is a watershed event in Indian Republic. The first time you have the president who have a completely non-Congress, non-centrist, non-left background, except Abul Kalam, who had a scientific trajectory. So we have an RSS, NDA, right, communal, whatever you call it, whatever. So there's a with the vice president coming, you will have an entire Republican sinecure as well as executive posts are filled with a political dispensation which actually was fighting as an opposition, ideological opposition. I don't agree with Mr. Tandon's agreement. Ideological have different shades, so you cannot have just united opposition, and they won't find that. Sure. So therefore, it is a watershed event in Indian political history. And therefore, what you are asking is whether this is going to be a kind of watershed in the social history also, where a lot of things were happening, churning happening. I don't think, because many of the things that are happening are deeply ideologically contested. And Kovind, Mr. Kovind, Honorable Kovind now, President of India, had no ideological antecedents of taking any cudgel. So therefore, let's not bring him to fight these ideological battles, because he had never fought them. So therefore, what kind of battle lines are being fought ideologically are already decided in the society or in the political realm. So therefore, he remains a symbol, but very powerfully controlled by one political ideological camp, which therefore signals that our ideological battle that opposition leader was pointing to is not going to end that soon.
Sure, okay. Yatish, let me bring you into the picture now. What's going to work for President Kovind?
You know, it was very interesting. If you hear what the President of the Republic said, or the President-elect of the Republic said, he pointed out three things. First, he cited examples of 4 presidents: Dr. Rajendra Prasad, Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, APJ Abdul Kalam, and Pranab Mukherjee. I think the last was more as a gesture of courtesy. But the other 3 presidents were towering figures in their own right.
Indeed.
Enormously important, irrespective of their ceremonial role, they were leaders. And you need to distinguish leaders from politicians to some extent, and leaders from presidents to some extent. Some president actually give leadership to the Republic, and that is what Govind has in front of him, the president has in front of him. What kind of leadership will he provide this country? Will it be a visionary leadership that APJ Kalam provided? Will it be a cohesiveness of sorts which Dr. Rajendra Prasad promised? Or the intellectual depth
that Kalam brought in. So I found it very interesting, the examples he cited. The second thing was, which was very important, and I'm sure the President-elect had thought through it. You know, he cited an example of his poverty. Now, this is the first generation Dalit leader who's actually seen poverty, compared to the opposition leader who was second generation and had actually never experienced poverty. So she was more Dalit in name and had a second-hand experience of what poverty means. Sure. This has its own repercussion to any leader who takes on a position like the president. What they do, what do they consider their priorities? Do they consider the beautification of the gardens or the micro improvement within the Rashtrapati Bhavan as the priority of the president? Or do they think that they need to, Kalam never considered that as very important. He never thought that, you know, I need to decorate and paint and, you know, reclassify the presidential house or the Bhavan. Similarly, you know, what is Kovind going to take on his priority? Is he going to talk more about the fact that the party that he comes from, the government that he represented before this in one form or the other, needs to focus on the poor? Sure. And in what way?
Sure.
Will he give, and the expectation, of course, and he's voicing that expectation, is that he's going to be the voice for those people. And I think we should be sensitive to the fact that, that somebody who has seen poverty is now sitting as the president of this country. And
Indeed.
We should respect that.
Indeed,
yeah.
Indeed. Aditi, you know, what are Ramnath Kovind's priorities really going to be, and what is it that, you know, the people generally also are going to expect of him?
Well, I mean, the people would expect him to be righteous, to speak up when and a blatant injustice is being committed, and to basically shape India. As to what his own priorities will be, I am sorry to say that I have no idea. Because he is not a person whom we know in any depth. He is not a person who has interacted. He has been a sort of a backroom person who is no doubt regarded very highly and has apparently spent his entire life in an exemplary fashion. I know that his wife was a municipal school teacher. While they were in Delhi, his son went to an English medium school, but you know, there's been never any kind of blemish or character flaw or any questions raised on his integrity. So that is a very important thing in this day and age.
Sure.
We do know that the family of a previous president really extended itself out of Rashtrapati Bhavan. We know that other presidents were guilty, well, I should not say guilty, were possibly charged with some misdemeanors, which which we don't talk about. But this president, I think, in that aspect, is going to be really a model president.
Indeed, indeed, no blemish as far as Mr. Ramnath Kovind is concerned. But Mr. Tandon, you know, there was this working relationship that Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Pranab Mukherjee shared. There was this camaraderie, even though they were ideologically from two different backgrounds, they complemented each other and something worked as far as these two gentlemen were concerned. Is that same thing going to be there with the new president?
Of course, because see, Pranab Mukherjee has very repeatedly said that he goes by the rule book, that is the Constitution of India. And the president, I think we should not be expecting so much of priorities as far as the presidency is concerned. He is head of the state and he is a constitutional head, and he has to discharge his duties to ensure that the government works within the framework of the Constitution. To that extent, I must say, most of our presidents in the past have also been the custodian of the Constitution. They have discharged all their duties fairly well. So I have no reason to believe that there could be any problem, because in fact, as you also mentioned, Pranab Mukherjee was the choice of the UPA, and in 2014 the NDA came to power, and even then both Prime Minister Modi and President Pranab Mukherjee had excellent equation. So there is absolutely no reason why President should have any problem in running this constitutional post. So I think all presidents in the past have done well, And because our constitution is such, our republic is such, that the president is the head of the state and he is the commander of the armed forces, and he discharges his duty as per provision of the constitution. He has to ensure that the government also functions within the framework of the constitution. Sure. And to that extent, I don't foresee any problem. And I would not be one who will be trying to list his priorities. I think the president's role is defined.
Indeed.
Indeed. And therefore, he will be functioning. And Pranab Mukherjee was himself being a professor and a student of Indian politics, and he would invariably say that his functioning is within the framework of the constitution, which he has done well. And in fact, somebody asked him how was his relation with the Prime Minister. He said, within the framework of the constitution, we had excellent relation. Sure. So there is no reason for anybody to doubt that Ramnath Kovind will not prove to be one of the best presidents of India.
Indeed.
Yes, of course.
You know, talking about Pranab Mukherjee, Professor, what is the legacy that he leaves behind?
You know, apart from legacy, I have two wish lists from the new president, sure, which Pranab Mukherjee did not fulfill for us, though he was a professor. One, the kind of calumny and infamy that JNU was imposed on for the last one year, what is happening. President being the visitor of that university, and since he was a bureaucrat too, he knows how the tricks, and also from the same dispensation. I think my wish list is that he does something to the poor students, poor man's children who used to come to JNU, who will not be able to come now. So he restores that first. Second, if you notice, 35 mercy petitions were not granted mercies by the president. So I think the new president will grant, because he comes from families of, and most of the people who are generally given these sentences, if you analyze, also have the similar background of coming from the scholar, whatever you call it. Therefore, these two sensitive human touches that after hearing him, I thought he will restore. Slightly more people should get mercy. And secondly, he being the visitors of Central University, and since education is in our major crisis zone, yes, he will restore some sense back to our university and universities, primarily to our personal university, that is my own university, that is JNU.
Sure. Okay. Right. Yes.
While discussing the role and powers of the president, we should not forget that the constitution very clearly lays down that the president shall act on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. So as far as mercy petitions are concerned, I don't think the president has actually the power to, grant mercies. In fact, Pranab Mukherjee, expedited that process, cleared all the pending files.
Sure, right.
So any president may delay certain things, but he can't really refuse, and he can't even grant mercies within the framework of the constitution.
Right,
so indeed, we should not be expecting too much from a president who shall be, acting on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers.
I'm running out of time, Mr. Tandon. I've got just 30 seconds left. Yatish, close the show for us with your concluding remarks and whether this will have any bearing on the vice presidential elections.
I think it does, considering the percentage of votes that came in, one. Second, the number of people who actually participated in the voting. So that means that, the vice presidential election should also see a similar voting percentages at least. It also has an impact, of course, on the fact that how that battle will shape up. I mean, right, clearly this ideology versus non-ideology and presenting or representing yourself as a section, for a section of the society, does not work at this level of political gamemanship. So,
okay. Yeah, indeed. Indeed. Okay, on that note, then I'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. I'd like to thank all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have today. See you again next time.